Hi guys, this morning I'm going to be baking 10 sourdough loaves all in one batch. We started attending the farmers market this year mainly to sell our pork, but when I realized that my sourdough was quite popular and it was quite cumbersome to be making 4 or 5 loaves as single loaves in a Dutch oven, I needed to find a different way to bake sourdough on scale. Now, I don't have a baker's oven, it's just a regular oven, so that is what I'm using. 2 other items that are going to make this process easy for you. The first one is you're going to need a cookie sheet. I will put 3 loaves on one of these trays. So you want the cookie sheet with the wire cooling rack in it, and it's really important that it has this lip, and I'll explain more about that later. The other 2 things that I found were my mixing bowls. This is actually a giant dog bowl, but it is stainless steel. It was in the pet section, but it was a lot cheaper than any large containers that I could find in the baking section or kitchenware section. And the great thing is it's stainless steel and not plastic. So I have 2 of those, and I'm going to do the dough for 5 loaves in each pan. So let's get going. I have my flour in a big sack down here, but I have found that when I'm making just 1 sourdough loaf, I can get away with using cups. But as you upscale, you'll find that it's much better to work with the flour based on weight. So I need 2,375 grams of flour. My bowl is not big enough, so I have to weigh it in a bag and then put it back into the bowl. So I'll put the recipe and the measurements in the show notes. This is just an all-purpose flour. I haven't tried it with different flours because my customer base at the market likes the all-purpose sourdough that I'm making. So I need 2 of those. Each bowl is getting 5 1/3 cups of filtered water. I am going to be putting 2 cups of starter in each of the bowls. Now, I will say about the starter is that I keep mine pretty thick, and I found that that helps with the overall form of the dough in the end. I'm not sure exactly what the hydration is, but as you can see, it's kind of quite gloopy. You'll see when I pour it out. 1 cup. If I had a scale big enough, I'd probably do this by weight as well. Okay, so that's 2 cups in there, and then 2 cups in this one. When I was learning how to do bulk sourdough, my main obstacle was to get around having to use 5 Dutch ovens. Mainly I didn't want to purchase 5 Dutch ovens, but also there's just not the space in my oven to put 5 Dutch ovens. And I didn't want the oven to literally be running all day. So I've got it down to where all my 10 loaves are done in basically a 2-hour cooking window, which saves on the electricity and time and heat in the kitchen. Okay, so I need to feed my remaining starter, and now I will get my salt in. So I'm using Mediterranean sea salt, and I want 8 teaspoons per dish. When you do things on bulk, you have to stop yourself and think, wow, that seems like a lot. But remember, you have sort of 5x the recipe. Okay. All right, so I am going to mix this up with my dough hook. This also is an amazing tool. I got mine off Amazon. I think it was about $20, but it came with, it might even have been less than that. It came with the bench scraper and the lame, which you're gonna want later. It really does make a difference, and it just helps being efficient. But that's really the only special sourdough equipment I have, I would say. I am going to give this dough 3 stretch and folds. So I do mine 20 minutes apart over an hour. So once this is all incorporated, then I'll leave it for the first 20 minutes and then I'll stretch and fold it, and then do it 2 more times before I let it do the bulk rise on the bench. It's nearly done. There's a few little pieces of flour at the bottom here, which I'm just trying to incorporate. So that's what I'm talking about down here. There's a few sort of crumbly pieces of flour. It's really important that you get all of the loose flour incorporated at the beginning because we want that flour to get hydrated. Okay, so as this dough hydrates, it will get smoother and softer and stickier and stretchier. So I'm kind of happy with that. All right, on to number 2. So I said that each pan is going to make 5 loaves, and if you are interested, just for labeling purposes, we have to label ingredients and weight of products at the farmer's market. Each loaf will end up weighing about 1 pound in dry weight, in cooked weight. So they are slightly smaller than, you know, your typical sourdough loaves, but I also found that my customers prefer, there are a lot of people who prefer to have a smaller one because they're not going to eat it all in one day unless they're going to a big family meal. So I've actually had people, even when I've had like different sizes of doughs, of loaves, I've really seen that the smaller ones are a little more popular. Sometimes it's just a couple who's buying it or a single person. So, of course, I always tell them that sourdough makes great paninis when you are not going to use it immediately. It's great if you pre-slice it and pop it in the freezer, and then when you want a toasted panini for lunch, just pop it out and add your toppings and toast it from frozen. It is wonderful. I think that one's good too. All right, so now I'm going to cover it and I'm going to set the timer for 20 minutes and come back for the first stretch and fold. Okay, my timer's gone off. It's been 20 minutes, and so I am just going to do the stretch and fold. Okay, I am just gonna stretch. You can see that the dough is still quite short at the moment. It hasn't got too much stretch in it. I'm just teasing it up. I stretch it until it starts seizing up, because then I can feel, like now, I don't get much pull in it. The stretch has gone out of it. So that's where I'm going to leave it. And I'm also going to flip it over so that next time I'm stretching it the other way. I'm going to set the timer for another 20 minutes and then we'll come back and do the second stretch and fold. Okay, so we're going to do stretch and fold number 2. It's already feeling smoother. I don't know if you can see there. It's not as crumbly and I'm able to stretch it a lot more. It still feels quite tight. You will find though, when you're working with a bulk amount of dough, it is a lot heavier just because you've got a bigger quantity of flour. So it might feel like, it feels elastic, but it does feel like it's tense, but the texture is really starting to improve. Again, I'm gonna pull it and stretch it until I feel it tighten up. Okay, so I'm gonna let it relax a third time. So that's number 2. We've got one more to do. Okay, I just turned my timer off. For the third time, we're gonna do the stretch and fold. I can see that the dough is looking a lot more pliable and stretchy. I'll just show you there. So that is the window pane test. You can see light coming through the dough, but the light's coming through before it breaks. So I'm pretty happy with how it's feeling. So I'm just going to turn it over. And that one is ready now for its bulk rise. So it's 10:30 in the morning. So in about 6 hours, so about 4:30, it'll be ready for shaping. Okay, so they are ready now, both of them. I will see you in a few hours. I'll typically let my dough sit on the counter for about 6 to 8 hours. So in the evening, once the dough has doubled in size, the next part of the process is to shape the loaves. I don't use banneton baskets, I just use these pasta bowls that I got from Amazon, and I line them with parchment paper. A little tip about getting parchment paper to stay in the bowls is to scrunch it up and open it out again so that it will take on the shape of the bowl with ease. So make sure that you crunch your parchment paper first. Because we're making bulk loaves, it's going to be really important that we get the size of the loaves uniform. So to do this, after I turn my dough out, I am going to roughly divide it by eye, but I'm going to use a scale to weigh each lump of dough before I shape it. So I'm looking for around 1 pound 10 ounces per lump of dough, and this is going to mean that once they're shaped, that they cook evenly in the oven. You don't want one loaf larger than the other because then the cooking time will vary per loaf. Just before the loaves go into the fridge for their overnight fermentation, I cover them with cling wrap just to stop them drying out while they're in the fridge all night. Okay, so it is now the next day and I have taken the 6 of the doughs out of the fridge from downstairs. They would be fine to sit there even longer, but this just works with my routine. I've preheated the oven to 415 degrees Fahrenheit, and what I've done is I've put in those cookie sheets with the cooling racks inside them, and I allow those to preheat with the oven. So my next step is to score the bread with the lame. With sourdough, you have to give it room to expand, as you probably know. And if you don't, then it will bust out at the seams and just look ugly. There are plenty of people out there on social media who are way more talented at doing all kinds of pretty designs, but I keep it simple, and then I'm just going to give each loaf a dusting of flour before it goes in the oven. Now I'm ready for the bread to go in the oven, and I actually want to bake it at 400 degrees, but the reason that I've set the oven to 415 is because when I open the door and put the dough in, which has been in the fridge, I'm actually going to lose some heat. So I let it sit at 415 to sort of compensate for the heat that I'm going to lose when I open the door. The other thing that I'm going to do, and this is why I said that the cookie trays were important, is that I am going to add sort of 2 cups, 1.5 cups of water to the trays. If you were just doing one tray, you would just need 1 cup of water. But I put that in the trays underneath the dough. And what that's going to do is it's going to steam the bread as it cooks so that the dough is not restricted from expanding. You see, with sourdough being cooked at a high temperature, if you just put the bread in there without anything to protect it, it's going to develop a hard crust faster than the bread can expand. So what we want to do is we want to keep it nice and moist inside the oven, and that's why professional baking ovens have this sort of steam injection that steams the bread at the perfect time to allow it to rise without it going too crusty too quickly. So I set the bread to cook for 50 minutes. However, what I'm going to do is keep an eye on it, because when it gets down to sort of 20 minutes to go, I am going to add some more water. I've just found that it evaporates too quickly in my oven, but you want to keep an eye on it, because if there is still water in the tray and the bread is still being steamed, you won't need to add more. So It might also be to do with the number of loaves that you've got in the oven, or whether you've got a fan going in the oven. So, but yeah, you can play around with it and see what works for you. Okay, the loaves are ready to come out. So I am going to take these ones out and then get the next 4 straight in. As you can see, they come out beautifully. And what I love about the fact that they bake on that cookie sheet is that the bottoms don't get as hard as they do in the Dutch oven. The remaining 4 loaves there on the counter, and I've transferred my original 6 into the basket that I'll take to market tomorrow. So there you have it, 10 loaves, no special equipment, and they come out just as well as they do in the Dutch oven. I am just so pleased with how these sourdough loaves bake, and that I can bake them in quantity and it takes no special equipment. If you enjoyed this video, I've got another one coming up. I have actually just started to make a dinner bread roll that we call a bap in Northeast England, and it's a super fast bread to make, only takes 10 minutes in the oven, and that's coming up next.